Miami Dolphins season obviously ended going against the Buffalo Bills in the first round of the playoffs. And we've taken a lot of time to reflect as Dolphins fans. The season's been over with. We've decompressed. We've detached ourselves emotionally from the team and just kind of gotten to look at it a little more analytically for what the season is. But now what we're going to do, we're going to go with a little bit of Miami Dolphins superlatives for the 2022-2023 season. Starting off first with the team MVP, team also offensive player of the year, and it couldn't be anybody else besides Tyreek Hill. Adding Tyreek Hill to this team completely changed over the offense. Obviously, bringing over Mike McDaniel helps immensely. Don't get me wrong, helps immensely. But Tyreek Hill, he had 1,700 yards this year. Let's see, he had, where'd it go? He had 1,700 yards this year. Why is it? Okay, screw my phone. 1,700 yards this year, and was one of just the best, one of the most premier acquisitions across the league in general this year. And we've seen the impact that wide receivers switching teams had. Just my last video over on JK Productions, if you want to go check that out. My Super Bowl prediction, talk about how much AJ Brown has impacted the Philadelphia Eagles, and it cannot be understated how much he has helped that team. But then you look at what Tyreek Hill has done for the Miami Dolphins, and it's been just as phenomenal. Now, he's not going to win. He's not going to win Offensive Player of the Year in the league. Like at one point, he looked like he was going to do. But 1,700 yards, 7 touchdowns is more than enough for Miami Dolphins Offensive Player of the Year. Then moving on to the most disappointing Player of the Year, and that's something that could definitely go to a few players. You look at Byron Jones. He didn't play at all this year, so that is just by definition very disappointing that we haven't seen him out there playing. Xavier Howard, even though he did make a Pro Bowl, didn't have one of his better years this year. But the guy I'm going to go with is the guy who I talked about in the video yesterday, that being Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki really had a chance this year to cement himself as the Miami Dolphins tight end and earn himself a lot of money in doing so. And just to put it bluntly, he didn't. He was very disappointing. I remember sending a screenshot halfway through the season to Donovan about, hey, look, how much would you pay this guy? And I think through 10 games, he had just over 200 yards receiving, had like 2 touchdowns. And Donovan honestly said, yeah, about $2 million. And then I revealed that was Mike Gesicki, and he was like, oh, still found a way to defend him because he's been defending Mike Gesicki all year long. I don't understand why, but he has been. That's his guy. Because he had 362 yards and 5 touchdowns at the end of the season, and just never got it going with Tua. Obviously, yesterday, the video you watched before, hopefully, breaking down what went wrong with him, and just a lot of it was due to him and Tua just never found that connection. He hasn't since Tua's joined the team. His numbers have gotten worse and worse compared to what it was like with Tannehill and Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's going to be moving on now to another team. It's sad to see that you draft him and had all this hope for him and just isn't the guy he panned out to be. So the team disappointment going to Mike Gesicki, the most improved player on the team. Now, this is an award that I don't really think this could have gone to anybody else. On the offensive side, just thinking about it, I don't think there's a single offensive player necessarily I would call most improved. So we're looking over at the defensive side of things, and we are going to be looking at a Mr. Jaelan Phillips. Jaelan Phillips finished the year 61 total tackles, 7 total sacks, and 8 tackles for loss as a whole. And he was just a monster. I think he was top 5, top 10 in quarterback pressures. And in his second year, still one of the younger defensive players in the league. He was one of the youngest players in his draft class. He proved why we took him so high in the first round like we did. And also the comparison between him and Gregory Rousseau, I feel like that's been squashed. He's certainly the better edge rusher compared to Rousseau, both coming out of the University of Miami. He had a good rookie year. It took him a long time to come in. I think he finished with 3 or 4 sacks there in his rookie year, but it did take him a while to finally have that impact. It was a lot like we saw with our edge rushers in general this year, where they were getting to the quarterback and weren't quite finishing. But then the second half of last year, we saw that. We saw the impact that he had. And then this year, we've seen it the majority of the season. I don't think he's necessarily a defensive player of the year, which we'll get to in just a second. But his impact, pressuring the quarterback, getting the hands in the face of the quarterback, making him uncomfortable, compared to what he did last year, 3/4 of the year, I think Jaelan Phillips is undeniably the most improved player of the year. But the defensive player of the year, that's going to go to Christian Wilkins. There was no bigger pest on the defensive side of the ball for the Miami Dolphins than Christian Wilkins. Christian Wilkins just finished short of 100 tackles with 98, had 3.5 sacks, 16 tackles for loss. The first quarter he had, I believe it was the Chargers game, was, I think, the best football I've ever seen him play. He was in the backfield on every single play. I think he may have had 3 or 4 of his tackles for loss in that game alone, or even in that quarter alone. He was a monster. And even with him, we know how good Christian Wilkins has been. He's a great disruptor in the run game. And also, again, he's just a pest. He's gonna poke, he's gonna pry, he's gonna grab. If you don't know what it is, then that's okay. He's going to get in the head of the other team, and he's just also so lovable. He's somebody you love to have on your team, but then you're going against him and you roll your eyes, and you hate to see him lining up, because he's a very talented player, as well as the fact that he is a little pest. Just short of 100 tackles. He's due for a huge extension. I would hate to see us let him walk. He's been our defensive player of the year. Moving on to the most promising future for the Miami Dolphins, a guy who's a little younger, and compared to, I want to say this as a relative basis, because Javon Holland had another great season, just as he did in his first season. I don't think he got better or worse. I think the secondary around him got worse, and that affected him as a whole. But one of the people around him in the secondary that certainly led up to their end of the bargain was Kader Kahoot. Kader coming out as an undrafted free agent, I had my doubts, but in a secondary that was desperate for somebody to step up, Kader Kahoot did. We were looking at Keon Crossan. Obviously, Trillbo goes down. Byron Jones doesn't play all year. Nick Needham tears his Achilles ACL early on in the season, and the defense needed somebody to step up, and that ended up being Kader Kahoot. He did have a few mistakes, but you couldn't getting that from a undrafted free agent who was never meant to be playing, never meant to be a team's number 2 corner. The work he put in to step up and fill in that role fine. When I saw him lined up against the other team's one of the other team's best players, I didn't mind. I wasn't scared like I was when I saw Keon Crossan guarding against Stephon Diggs, or insert your wide receiver. Kader Kahoot had an incredible year with the Dolphins, and I really expect him to be a key part of this team. And that does make decisions like, what do you do with Nick Needham, who's a free agent? What do you do with Trillbo? What do you do with Byron Jones? It makes those decisions a little easier, because you may have found another gem. You may have found another Nick Needham right here with Kader Kahoot. And the final superlative that I have this year, and I am ending on a little bit of a negative note, and just simply calling it bye-bye. The bye-bye award goes to nobody could really second guess this at all. Keon Crossan. Bye. Again, he was never meant to be in that situation in the first place. He was never meant to be guarding Stephon Diggs. He was never meant to be on the other team's best player, but through circumstance he was, and oh boy, did he play himself out of the Dolphins uniform. The amount of times you see a deep ball over the top, and the camera starts to pan over, and then you just see that 27, you're like, sorry for those listening on the radio, you just want to bang your head against the wall, as I say time and time again with him. Again, not his fault. There was never meant to be there, but he certainly wore his welcome, and his time at Dolphins uniform is certainly done. So team MVP / offensive player of the year, Tyreek Hill. Team disappointment, Mike Gesicki. Most improved, Jalen Phillips. Defensive player of the year for the Miami Dolphins, Christian Wilkins. Most promising future, Kader Kahoot. And bye-bye to Keon Crossan.